Before we start, I just want you to notice something. Comments were made about paper. What do I have here? Who is the millennial now? Well, we'll see how this goes. This could be fun. We're reflecting on welcome, and I think it's important for us to think about welcome as a posture. Welcome is a posture. You know, there's this book series that you might know about. I think there's like 250 of them. It's called Companies Coming. And this lady's actually incredible. She started writing these books in her 50s, and she's now 94, and I think company is still coming. But the whole premise of this book is that this is something good to be excited about, and there's all these recipes. Company's coming. How do you feel about that? Company's coming. Maybe sometimes it's like with a little bit of panic. Company's coming? Oh no. I better be on my best behavior. I better clean up the house. I better borrow mom's recipe. I don't know. Company's coming. What am I going to do? It could be a crisis. I'm just saying it might not be, but it could be. You know, but I think this idea of companies coming is more than just creating a menu. I think it's creating space in your life for other people, creating a posture of hospitality and welcome for people who are more or less strangers to you. It's about welcoming. It's about creating a space of welcome. Now, maybe it's about food. Yes, it is about food, but it's more about the welcome for people. To welcome, we must be welcoming people. Welcome is a posture. I think many have struggled with this concept. What does welcoming mean? How do we become welcoming individuals and welcoming people? How do we do this? There was this great, famous thinker who thought a lot about welcome. For him, welcome and being welcoming was this countercultural thing that could start a revolution. So he thought a lot about the practice of hospitality. And I'll tell you, it was more than just casseroles, although who doesn't like a good casserole, right? Especially Kyle. Kyle loves casseroles, just so you know. But this idea of hospitality was no less than a social revolution, a way of upending the powers, of restoring equality, and ultimately of being human with other human beings and creating a just and harmonious society. This is all with the idea of hospitality and the humble casserole. His name, I know you think I'm going to say Jesus. That's coming later. His name was Henry David Thoreau. And he wrote this book. He was this American naturalist, philosopher, writer, and he was also a bit of an activist. He had a real activist bent. He wanted to upend society, and he thought a lot about civil disobedience and acts that would actually subvert the powers. And for him, hospitality and simple living was one of these things. So he wrote a book. His most famous book is called Walden. I don't know why it's called Walden, but it sounds, I love the image of this. So he goes into the woods by a lake, and he builds a cabin by himself, and he lives there for 2 years by himself. Like, who wouldn't want to do that? Oh, no, I wouldn't either. And he lived in this complete simplicity and reflected on what community was, what hospitality is. And he mentioned this in one of his books. That hospitality is one of the things that can upend a total society. In his cabin, he's just reflecting on this. And this is a quote from his book, Walden. He writes this: I sometimes expected the visitor who never comes. The Vishnu Purana says the householder is to remain at eventide in his courtyard as long as it takes to milk a cow, or longer if he pleases, to await the arrival of a guest. I often performed this duty of hospitality, waited long enough to milk a whole herd of cows, but did not see a man approaching from the town. He's quoted this ritual about hospitality. You have this practice that you just go out and you wait for a stranger. You're just ready for the stranger, the unexpected person, to offer them hospitality and welcome. By chance, they might come. I guess he waited on his porch every night and nothing happened for 2 years. I mean, that's what happens when you build a cabin in the woods by a lake in the middle of nowhere, I guess. Not many people walking by. Hospitality, according to him, though, was being ready to welcome any stranger. And I think that kind of gives us a new meaning to companies coming, right? You got to have that recipe book ready all the time. Standing out on your porch every night before dinner, looking for someone who might be coming up the street and ready to ask them in for dinner. Can you come in for dinner? That's what he's saying. Stand out there and wait and look for opportunities to practice hospitality and welcome. And here's the question that sounds like a really interesting ideal. It sounds good. Company's coming. Always be ready. Always have a casserole in the freezer to put in the oven. You may be entertaining angels. You never know. Is it just an idea? One critic had this to say, a literary critic, about Thoreau. He said, would Thoreau, the famous writer, open up his cabin to me to get a signature on his book? Would he really do that? There's a bit of doubt there. Was this just an ideal that a philosopher wrote up? I mean, I guess we'll never really know. But I think somehow the challenge is to move past ideas to reality, to practices. Now, this raises an interesting challenge for us as followers of Jesus who would never disagree with the idea of welcoming a stranger. But what needs to happen for us to become a people who are actually able and willing to welcome the stranger? What change needs to happen? Does a change need to happen? I think Thoreau had a great idea, a great question. It has the ring of truth to it. Yet I'm convinced to figure this out, what it means to be welcome and to be welcoming, we need to turn to Jesus. We're in the middle of this series called Shema and Stuff. If you're wondering what the Shema is, here's some shorthand. Love God, love others, and stuff. That's what the series is about. Shema and stuff. We're talking about our values. That's part of the stuff. We have 4 values as a church: being generous, being Christ-centered, being intergenerational, and welcoming. Today we're talking about the value of welcoming. And I want to tell you that as a church, we entered this process together of discerning our values, what they actually were, and bringing the best out in those values. So this is something that existed in this church. We had a history of wanting to be and practicing radical welcome and hospitality. We've been a people of welcome. We've done a good job of that. We identified that as something core about who we are, and we know we have a lot of room to grow in that too. So that's the whole thing. A value is not something you're perfect in, something you identify as a value and want to grow in. And I, for one, love that idea of welcome. I'm so behind it. Do you guys like the idea of welcome? I should see more hands with this than the cabin one. Yes? Okay, so more than one live in a cabin 2 years by themselves. Good. So today I want to unpack the idea of welcome and hear Jesus' voice speaking into it, because I know that the idea of welcome and being welcoming is sometimes an idea that is hard to put into action. Like Thoreau writing about sitting on your porch as long as it takes to milk a cow. Well, first of all, who has a porch like that and who milks cows? Not me. It's like the idea of company coming with welcoming. The idea sounds like company's coming, yay! But the reality is more like, oh, company's coming. I'm too tired. Company's coming. I also do know this. If you want to pick a fight, walk into a church and ask if they are welcoming. Try it. Are you a welcoming people here? It's a good way to pick a fight. It could be fun. And you ask for details. Well, who's welcome in your church? Can you tell me who's welcome? Tell me who's not welcome in your church. How are you welcoming? Could be a really interesting, stimulating conversation. They may or may not be able to answer, but I promise you one thing, there will be some pepper in that conversation. Of course we say everybody is welcome. We stand at the door and wait to greet. It's like our porch. It's like Thoreau cabin porch out there. We greet people. We look for newcomers, and I think we do a good job of that. We want to welcome people in. We look for people to welcome. But sometimes there seems to be a lot of fine print if you look at what it means to be welcome. What does it mean to be welcoming? Does it mean that we welcome everyone into our worship services, into our homes, into our leadership? What does it mean? Maybe we welcome everybody. Maybe. But it seems to me there might be a scale of most to least. I'm just saying, maybe in our heads there's this scale of most welcome to least welcome. All of us might have it. It looks a bit like this. It's an imaginary game called the secret welcome scale that we all have in our heads. Maybe. Maybe you don't. Maybe you do. Let's just pretend, okay? The secret welcome scale. The voices in our head. And we say, wow, there's a family coming to the door in a big SUV with 4 kids. And they've been to Bible school and they're great tithers. And I know they'll add to our youth program and they'll give us critical mass. Ooh, they are welcome. That's pretty high in the welcome scale. And then it maybe moves a bit from there down to, maybe to someone like me who's like getting a little long in the tooth and doesn't have, I'm not that old. Carly thinks I am, but I'm not. And actually doesn't have, isn't coming with kids or a big SUV or anything like that. Maybe I look a little questionable. Scale keeps moving down. And I think some of us maybe have this idea of the ideal attendee on the secret welcome scale. It might be different for you, but I think maybe we all have it depending on what stage of life we're at. Who the ideal person would be for us to welcome into our lives and into the church. It is the shadow side of welcome in the church. Some people are more welcome than others. And I think it's a challenge for us to grow past that. I think the example of Jesus calls that into question. That easy road, that dark road of shadow welcome. And I want to hear the example of Jesus today in Mark 2, which we heard read earlier. And I think he calls us all into question. And it will challenge us deeply. Jesus is never easy. If you think Jesus' words are easy, well, I won't finish that sentence. He challenges us. And he convicts us, I hope, of how we view welcome and how we may be tempted to treat people. And ultimately, make us a people that welcome like Jesus welcomes. And move welcome from an idea to a posture and a practice. There's a story about Jesus as a host in the Bible. And I've got this image of him kind of like he's standing on the porch, waiting and hoping and inviting someone, anyone, to come join him. That's his invitation. He's waiting on the porch for anyone to come join him. And he just really, really wants to be that host. He wants to welcome people. He really wants you to join him. He's ready. The light is on. The table is set. Casserole is ready. And it's not an ideal. You actually can join him. He's ready to open the doors always. And Jesus says, company's coming. He says it better than us. Today we pick up in Mark chapter 2, and Jesus gives us a schooling on hospitality that Jean Perret from Companies Coming and Thoreau only wish they could accomplish these ideals. It's in chapter 2, And we're only in chapter 2. A lot has happened already in the book of Mark. It's incredible that we're only in chapter 2. He has stirred up opposition among the religious leaders. They already know they don't like him because of the things he says about welcome, about God, about who he is, and about what he's trying to do, about Israel. They already know they don't like him. He is identifying himself as God's son, and he's challenging the status quo. People do not like him. He is not welcome among the religious elite. Imagine that. Jesus is not welcome. He revealed that he is God made human and shows us what God is like better than these old ideas of what God was like. And the Pharisees and religious leaders noticed that their ideas of who God was didn't match what Jesus was saying about who God was. There was this contrast between the two things, and that caused them a lot of angst. Jesus says God is one way, but we see God as this way. Caused a lot of trouble. In Mark chapter 2, he's this host who's making friends with the wrong people, at least in the eyes of the Pharisees and the religious leaders and the scribes. Code for churchy people. He's standing on the porch, ready to welcome anybody that comes in and wants to join him. And he's doing things that show people that this Son of God is not what they expected, is not here to live up to their demands, and is not about playing their religious games. And he's serious about people, he's serious about being a host, and he's serious about extending radical welcome to people that want to join him. This is what's happened in Mark 1. He's been baptized, and he says he's preaching the good news of the gospel. The kingdom of God has arrived. He announces that people should repent and follow him. He calls fishermen to follow him, and they just drop their nets and follow him. He calls the sons of Zebedee to follow him. James and Andrew, they just follow him. James and John, sorry. He goes to the synagogue and teaches with authority, casts out evil spirits. He heals people. After dark, this is all one day. He's not taking a break. It's after dark. He's healing people. And then, like it wasn't a long enough day, he travels through Galilee preaching and teaching and healing. And here we are only in Mark chapter 2. This is the dinner table is set for this conflict that's about to happen. So the teachers of the law are not happy about this. Just a couple verses before, a paralyzed man had been lowered through the roof. And what would we expect Jesus to say to a paralyzed man? Be healed? But no, he said something kind of surprising. He says, repent and be forgiven. The Pharisees did not like that because only God can forgive sins. And then he heals him. Kind of seems like the backwards order, right? I think we would maybe tell Jesus to do it a bit different. But anyway, that's what he did. And they weren't happy about that. And then they complained that he'd healed the man. He says, stand up, pick up your mat, and follow me. Go home. This is all before the text today. And Jesus, in these 2 short chapters, has stirred up this hornet's nest of opposition, this righteous indignation towards who he is showing God to be. And there's this consistent theme with these religious, churchy people of Jesus' time. They're saying this: some people just don't belong. We don't want them. Some people, you turn off the porch lights when you see them coming. Some people, you leave the casserole in the freezer. They're not coming for dinner. Company is not coming. That's what Jesus is up against. So this is what he does. He's walking around the Sea of Galilee, and he comes to a tax collector named Levi. And Levi is standing by his booth. And you got to think about this booth. It's kind of like a lot of old references. I don't really think of myself as old, for the record, but do you guys remember the Coca-Cola toll booth? How much we loved that? We loved the toll booth. Well, this is what he's doing. He's sitting at his booth. It's like a toll booth. And he's collecting taxes from people that are walking through. And the Jewish people just despise tax collectors for a number of reasons. One, because he's working for Herod, which is a puppet ruler. And he's kind of like this what's the word? The people that conspire with enemies. Do you guys know that word? They're not a double agent. Okay. I could Google it right now, actually. Anyway, I'm not going to do that. But he's collecting taxes. Collaborator. He's a collaborator. He's a collaborator with the Romans. He's helping them put the boots on the necks of the Jews. And he's in this booth. He is hated, not just because he's doing his job, but because these tax collectors also were extortionists. They would charge more, they would manipulate, they would do all sorts of things to get money. And it was a job that people wanted because it was a get-rich thing. So Jesus sees him, and he calls him and says, "Follow me," and welcomes him. This is it in Mark chapter 2, verses 13 to 14. This is the scene. This is what it says. Then Jesus went out to the lakeshore again and taught the crowds that were coming to him. As he walked along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at a tax collector's booth. "Follow me and be my disciple," Jesus said to him. So Levi got up and followed him. He just follows him. Isn't that weird? Can you imagine someone saying that to you? He just got up and follows him. And I wonder what was at stake for him. See, this wasn't like leaving a fisherman's job where there's lots of fish and you can just go back to fishing because the nets are still there. You leave a job with the government and you're done, especially this job. There was a lot at stake for him to just get up and follow and leave his job. A lot at stake. He was a tax collector. And he just follows. I think it's kind of strange. I actually think, and I don't know, but I think maybe he was just kind of dead inside. And he was ready for a change. And he just thought, I'm broken. I need a change. I'm dying. I want to do something different. He was just ready for Jesus' invitation. He was broken, so he responded. And the very first thing they did is have a dinner party. Company's coming. And who did they invite? They invited other tax collectors. A whole bunch of tax collectors, a whole bunch of these despised people. So imagine Jesus sitting on the porch with a sign, "Tax collectors, come on in. You're welcome. We want you to join us. Come on in. You're welcome. There's a casserole waiting for you." So he's having a party with all of these guys. This is in verse 15. Later, Levi invited Jesus and the disciples to his home as dinner guests, along with many tax collectors and other disreputable sinners. There were many people of this kind among Jesus' followers. But when the teachers of religious law, who were Pharisees, I'm not going to read that yet. No, yes, I am. But when the teachers of religious law, who were Pharisees, saw him eating with tax collectors and other sinners, they asked his disciples, "Why does he eat with such scum?" Scum? That's quite a label to wear, isn't it? To call someone scum. Why does he eat with such scum? This is who you're having dinner with, who you're having over for dinner? This scum? You're waiting on the porch for these people? These are the ones who are not welcome. These are the ones who are not on the top of our secret list. They're on the bottom of the scale. They're not welcome. And I want to give them credit. They say it right out. They own it. They're transparent about it. It's not a secret list. It's a visible list. They're not welcome. But think about this. It must have been hard for those Pharisees, and I want to challenge you maybe to move ourselves and align ourselves a bit with the Pharisees today, with the religious leaders. I know it's hard work. Can we try that? Align ourselves with them? Because it's like welcoming those people to dinner or to a church event or to your house who have harmed you. That's what it's like. It's not easy. These people have done real harm to other Jewish people. So the Pharisees knew this. These were not people that were easy to like. It's like inviting someone to a church banquet who's a known criminal in Kelowna and it gets on Castanet. It's like, what is First Baptist doing? Having those scum here. Those people were enemies of the Jews, collaborators. I said it twice, I know it now. They used people, they stole from people, they were dishonest. And maybe that label worked. I don't know. It did for the Pharisees. And we know, along with the Pharisees, that you don't yell companies coming for these kind of people. I think I can identify with the Pharisees a bit, even though I don't want to. I might be more like them than I like to think. So the Pharisees react, and they're upset about it. And I want to give you one more thing. It's like your parents saying, hey, for Christmas dinner, we've invited your least favorite person. How do you feel about that? Company's coming. Why does he eat with sinners? Why indeed? Well, Jesus welcomes, and this is his response in verse 17. It's profound. He says, when Jesus heard this, he told them, healthy people don't need a doctor, sick people do. I have come to call not those who think they are righteous, but those who know they are sinners. I find myself, after thinking about this response and aligning myself with the Pharisees, not so much different than what the critic wondered about Thoreau, if I have an idea of hospitality or a posture of hospitality. I like the idea of welcome and hospitality. I think I'm willing to wait on the porch with the light on for a delightful guest. But not so sure I'm into Jesus' company. And I wonder, am I called to be more like Jesus here? Are we called to be more like Jesus here? Are we called to be more like Jesus? And then how? How do we become the person, the people who leave the light on the porch and look to someone to welcome them when they're not the person we desire to welcome? They're not on our list. How? There's something significant here. And I'm sure you've noticed. Mark uses contrast a lot here. There's the contrast between the Pharisees' behavior and Jesus' behavior and how they view welcome is contrasted. They're opposite views. And they have to do with the heart and what's inside and the action that takes place on the outside that stems from the heart. They're connected, those two things. And in Jesus' welcome, there's three significant things for us to pay attention to when we struggle with the idea of welcome. Number one, the Pharisees labeled people. Jesus didn't. Jesus did not use labels. He didn't call people scum. The Pharisees labeled people. Number two, the Pharisees were concerned about their reputation. What will people think if you're seen with people like this? Jesus didn't care about his reputation. He wasn't worried about his reputation. They called him disreputable people. Jesus was okay being with disreputable people, eating with them, being seen with them. Number three, the Pharisees welcomed righteous people, the people who looked like they had it all together, and Jesus welcomed sinners. Not the healthy, the sick. Not the righteous, but the unrighteous. And I think it's quite the contrast. And there's something there for us today. This is the example of Jesus. And I want to observe he did three things that flow out of that contrast that I think are instructive and require a heart of transformation to welcome people like Jesus did, the opposite of the Pharisees. One, we don't label. Two, we welcome people in humility. And three, we recognize brokenness. Jesus didn't label people. He didn't call them scum. He saw their humanity. He saw them as people created in the image of God. He saw them. He truly saw them. And he said, follow. He invited, you're welcome. You are welcome. Just join me. You're invited. Who wants to eat at my table? Number two, he welcomed in humility. The Pharisees were worried about their reputation, who they're seen with. Jesus' reputation was about his love and righteousness and how he treated others. He wasn't worried about being infected or what people thought. He was humble. And humility is security in self without the need for approval from others. And therefore, you're able to love people. The prideful are not able to love because they're too busy looking into the mirror of approval. And things become about themselves. Therefore, they don't want undesirables crowding their porch. Number 3, he recognized brokenness. He saw it and recognized it. The sinners who refused to follow were people who refused to follow the Mosaic law as the Pharisees interpreted it. And Jesus included them because he knew where they were. The righteous don't need help. You can't give advice to someone who knows everything. Have you ever tried that? It's pretty tough. You can't feed people who aren't hungry, and you can't heal people who are perfect. That's what the Pharisees were like, but the unrighteous, the sinners, were people that were broken in need of help. They recognized their brokenness. And Jesus' call is to salvation, and you must be in need of recognition of need. Self-righteous person is not able to recognize a need, but a sinner can. And I want to tell you, I think the disreputable people might be better company than those people that have it all together. I think that's a better party. They're raw and welcoming about being with people who have nothing to lose. That's what Jesus did. It was this raw conversation. They're broken and they're real. And it's great to have conversations like that, especially when people know it. There's an authenticity. There's not faking it. There's not hiding brokenness, because all of us are broken to a degree, and some of us hide it very successfully. So what does it mean for us to welcome like Jesus? As Christ's body, we are to welcome people in the same way that Jesus welcomed people. Leave the porch lights on, hoping, not for the ideal, but in our heart, that we can welcome people. This is the way of Jesus in welcome. Don't label people. It's what Jesus did. He didn't label people. Putting people into categories and people groups separates, doesn't bring people together. Labels self-empower, and they separate. They put up barriers and walls, and they isolate. They destroy relationships. And we're challenged to see the person who is created in the image of God and to love them as Jesus loves them and sees them. Number 2, we are called to be a people of humility. To not worry about a reputation, but maybe to get a bit disreputable. More focus on people than what other people think. When we welcome people in the name of Jesus, we don't first ask, what will people think if they see me loving this person? Shoot, better not. No, we don't do that. We ask what's best for this person. No, Jesus was disreputable with his followers. I find it interesting in verse 15 it said, many of Jesus' followers are people of disrepute. Think about that. Are we people of disrepute? Any of us? Maybe we need to get a bit more disreputable. We need to recognize our own brokenness. We are not better than anybody else. We're all broken. Maybe we're on a continuum or spectrum on a journey to health through Jesus. Okay, Jesus does do his work and we can journey through to health. I get that. But to a certain degree, we are all broken. And we need to recognize that Jesus accepts us with all of our brokenness and warts. And then we approach people with compassion. We're able to do that when we see ourselves more accurately. I think we need to work on our hearts. I think welcoming starts with the hearts. And I think we can do this. It starts inside, not with an idea, but with a transformed heart. And a heart of Jesus is a welcoming heart. That's what Jesus' heart looks like. It's welcoming. I want to read to you a verse from the Epistle of Ephesians. This is chapter 3, verses 16 to 18. And it talks about this transformation of our hearts. I pray that from his glorious, unlimited resource, he will empower you with inner strength through his Spirit. Then Christ will make his home in your hearts as you trust in him. Your roots will grow down into God's love and keep you strong. And may you have the power to understand, as all God's people should, how wide, how long, how high, and how deep his love is. May you experience the love of Christ, though it is too great to understand fully. Then you will be made complete with all the fullness of life and power that comes from God. And I'm think of that verse, and I wrestle with this. I believe that being welcoming starts with our hearts being transformed. And I think we need to ask that God transforms our hearts. Welcoming is a posture. It's a change of heart. Where's your front porch? In your life, where is your front porch? What represents your front porch? Maybe you have a lot of front porches. Maybe this is one of them. Where is your front porch? And are you looking? Are you waiting for that opportunity to welcome someone in like Jesus would? Are you looking? Are you hoping for that? I know God is calling us, and we as a church have identified welcome as a value. And I think we're on the journey of moving that from the paper to the porch. So I want to challenge you guys, and I challenge myself too. Let's turn the light on and put the casserole in. And let's say, company's coming. Let's respond in worship.